Imagine taking a deep breath. Oxygen fills your lungs and you barely notice it. Breathing feels so natural that we almost forget how extraordinary it really is. Oxygen is the invisible fuel that keeps our bodies alive. Without it, every cell in us would suffocate in moments. Yet for the first half of Earth's history, oxygen wasn't here. Our planet was almost entirely without it. And the arrival of oxygen changed everything. It was the most dramatic environmental shift our planet has ever experienced. Scientists call it the Great Oxidation Event. It wasn't just an event, it was a revolution. It was a catastrophe for some life forms, a blessing for others, and the foundation for the world we know today. So in this journey, let's go back in time, billions of years, to understand what the Earth was like before oxygen, how it arrived, why it nearly killed everything alive at the time, and how it eventually set the stage for us humans to exist. 4.5 billion years ago, Earth was born from swirling cosmic dust and rock. Back then, the planet was violent, molten, and bombarded by asteroids. Over time, the surface cooled, oceans formed, and an atmosphere developed. But this atmosphere was not like the one we breathe today. It had almost no oxygen. Instead, it was filled with gases like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen, and water vapor. To us, it would be poisonous. If a human traveled back to that time, every breath would choke them. Yet for the earliest microbes, this was home. Life in that ancient world was primitive. The first organisms were single-celled and lived in oceans. They didn't need oxygen. In fact, oxygen was toxic to them. They thrived in an anoxic world, a world without oxygen. For millions upon millions of years, this was the only type of life Earth knew. Something revolutionary happened about 3 billion years ago. A special group of microbes appeared, cyanobacteria. These were tiny organisms with an extraordinary ability. They could perform photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process of using sunlight to make food. Plants today do it, but cyanobacteria were the pioneers. They absorbed carbon dioxide, combined it with water, and used sunlight to produce sugars. The byproduct of this process? Oxygen. At first, that oxygen didn't go into the atmosphere. It reacted with other elements in the oceans. It combined with iron dissolved in seawater, producing rusty minerals. This is why we find banded iron formations, layered rocks made of iron oxides, all over the world today. These rocks are like ancient signatures, proof that oxygen was beginning to appear billions of years ago. But the cyanobacteria kept working, day after day, century after century, producing oxygen nonstop. Slowly, the oceans reached their capacity. The iron was used up, the other chemicals that absorbed oxygen were saturated. And finally, oxygen started escaping into the atmosphere. Around 2.4 billion years ago, oxygen levels in the atmosphere started to rise significantly. This was the start of what scientists call the Great Oxidation Event. Now, you might think that oxygen would have been celebrated as a wonderful gift, but for the organisms alive at the time, it was closer to poison. The microbes that had thrived in an oxygen-free world suddenly faced a crisis. Oxygen molecules damaged their cells and disrupted their chemical reactions. What was a life-giving gas to us was a deadly toxin to them. This was Earth's first mass extinction. Countless anaerobic microbes perished because they simply couldn't survive in the new oxygen-rich conditions. The world they knew was ending. Yet while many forms of life vanished, others adapted. Some microbes found ways to hide in oxygen-free environments, like deep sediments, caves. Others evolved new strategies. They developed ways to tolerate oxygen and even use it. These were the ancestors of what we now call aerobic organisms, life that breathes oxygen. So was the Great Oxidation Event good or bad? The answer is both. For the organisms that couldn't cope, it was catastrophic. The very air that filled the skies was toxic to them. It was like the planet itself had turned against them. But for future life, including us, it was the greatest gift possible. Oxygen allowed for cellular respiration, a much more efficient way to extract energy from food. Instead of just squeezing out a little bit of energy through fermentation, oxygen allowed cells to unleash nearly 20 times more energy from the same amount of food. That extra energy opened the door for life to grow bigger, more complex, and eventually multicellular. Without oxygen, there would be no plants, no animals, no humans. As oxygen spread, it left permanent marks on the planet. The oceans literally rusted. All of the dissolved iron turned into solid iron oxides that sank to the seafloor, forming layers upon layers of rock. These layers, called banded iron formations, can still be found in places like Australia, Canada, and South Africa. They are billions of years old, and they are evidence of Earth's oxygen revolution. On land, rocks also oxidized. Minerals turned red as iron reacted with oxygen. The surface of Earth was transforming chemically and visually. This was not just a change in the air, it was a full-scale planetary makeover. Oxygen didn't just kill microbes, it also changed the climate. Before oxygen, the atmosphere had lots of methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. Methane trapped heat and kept Earth warm. But oxygen reacted with methane, breaking it down into carbon dioxide and water. Carbon dioxide is also a greenhouse gas, but it's weaker than methane. The result? The planet cooled dramatically. Some scientists believe this cooling triggered one of Earth's most extreme ice ages, the snowball Earth. During this time, ice may have covered the entire planet from pole to pole. Imagine Earth as a frozen marble drifting through space. If that theory is correct, then the rise of oxygen nearly froze the planet solid. Life survived, but barely. Microbes likely found refuge in cracks in the ice, in deep-sea hydrothermal vents, or in small pockets of liquid water. The organisms that survived the Great Oxidation Event set the stage for the next chapters of life. The survivors included not only cyanobacteria, but also those early microbes that learned to use oxygen instead of being poisoned by it. This shift led to the rise of eukaryotes, cells with nuclei. Eukaryotes could harness oxygen's energy, and over time, they became the building blocks of complex life. From these small beginnings came algae, fungi, plants, and eventually animals. Every breath we take today traces back to those microbes that adapted to oxygen billions of years ago. It's hard to overstate how important oxygen was for evolution. Without it, cells would remain simple. With it, they have the power to build more structures, store more information, and support bigger bodies. Oxygen didn't immediately lead to dinosaurs or humans. That took billions more years, but it laid the foundation. It was the spark that made complexity possible. Without the Great Oxidation Event, Earth might still be a world of tiny microbes floating in oceans, with no plants, no forests, no animals, and no people to wonder about it. Today, scientists searching for life on other planets look for oxygen in their atmospheres. Why? Because on Earth, oxygen means life. If we detect oxygen elsewhere, it could be a sign that photosynthetic organisms exist there too. But the Great Oxidation Event reminds us that oxygen is not always friendly. It's both a creator and a destroyer. On another planet, oxygen might also cause mass extinctions before allowing new life to thrive. Even though the Great Oxidation Event happened billions of years ago, its legacy is everywhere. Every time you see a rusty nail, you are looking at oxygen's work. Every time you take a breath, you are participating in the cycle it started. The air we breathe, the complex bodies we live in, the forests, the oceans, the animals, the people, all of it traces back to cyanobacteria and the oxygen they released. It was a turning point that made our existence possible. So the next time you breathe in, remember this. The air filling your lungs is not just oxygen, it is history. It is the legacy of the Great Oxidation Event, the catastrophe that destroyed a world and at the same time gave birth to another, richer, more complex one. It is the reason we are here today, able to think, to speak, and to wonder about our own origins.